in balance, that keeps our body in check, that helps us healthily live and maintain the most basic biological functions that we have. And at the time, 2.5 years ago, I said, man, that's a great theory. It actually makes some sense, but it seems a little far-fetched to me. Here we are a couple of years later, we've discovered so much more, and we're continuing to discover so much more about the endocannabinoid system. And like I said, I had my oh shit moment 2 years ago. I hope many of you today, maybe you'll have your first oh shit moment. But when you listen to what Bob Melamede has to say, I'm telling you, it will change your thinking about this whole concept of marijuana and medical marijuana and the endocannabinoid system. So I'm very pleased to bring up here Dr. Robert Melamede.
Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to be here. Nothing ever is quite as nice as being in the presence of a whole bunch of stoners. Something fundamentally different, and part of that is what I'm going to talk about now. So I couldn't resist changing my presentation a little bit when I saw today's news. The FDA says no to medical marijuana. Agency says no studies support the efficacy. I'm a very conservative scientist. I'm not conservative in other ways, but scientifically I'm extremely conservative. And I'm very analytical about what's going on and very cautious about what I say. And what I want to talk to you about today is my very carefully derived conclusions over actually many, many years. I've been a cannabis consumer now for 42 years on an almost daily basis. And always proud of it. And early on it always seemed to me that this was something so good. And as the science kept unfolding and I participated in it and learned about it, I was very happy to see the way it all unfolded. So I want to communicate with you today some of the ideas that I think allow us actually to not only understand how cannabis works and the various medical properties that it has and why it's so good for us, but actually to extend that. I'm going to focus more on the extensions a little here today than I did, for example, 2 weeks ago with the Patients Out of Time, to help try and provide us with a way of looking at why this drug war exists, and in particular why the drug war exists against marijuana, and even more particular, what kind of people are going after sick people for using their medicine. So I hope that you'll come away with an understanding as to why this insanity exists, and perhaps through that understanding we might devise better ways of trying to make change. So, of course I forgot to turn on my own little recorder because I have no brain. This is an article that came out literally a week or so ago. And basically they're talking about cannabis tolerance and dependence, but there were some things that were mentioned that I think it's important for us to get a perspective on, because it's the kind of stuff that we're going to have to deal with from the what I call the primitive people, the fascist-minded primitive people that are controlling so much of the insanity today. In humans, abstinence from continual marijuana use leads to delayed withdrawal symptoms manifesting as psychological symptoms of decreased appetite and weight loss, as well as emotional changes which include irritability, anxiety, restlessness, and strange dreams. Accepting that these symptoms reflect a clinically significant withdrawal syndrome is gaining acceptance. So this clearly shows what one of the attacks, the nature of one of the attacks that's going to come and is being supported by this kind of interpretation. And what I want to do is, before I get into what I wanted to talk about, just give you a little armament for deflecting the stupidity that we're seeing here and why, in fact, this is stupid. If you take a population of people, we all have these cannabinoid receptors, we make cannabinoids, we break them down, but we all do it in a manner that's unique to us, just like we all look differently. All of our biochemistry is different as well. We have the same genes, we have different flavors of those genes that are all controlled in different manners. Well, look at the things that they're talking about here. Irritability. Well, we know marijuana makes you a little bit more relaxed, a little less irritable. We know that it can reduce anxiety. We know that it helps promote sleep. And I know about everybody else, but I know myself, one of the things I love best about stopping marijuana use is I really enjoy dreams. And when I consume, I almost never remember my dreams. It's not that you don't dream, you just don't remember them. So it's always such a pleasure to find this whole new world of reality, of pseudo-reality at least, when I stop. Well, what we're seeing in a population of people are people who have needs for cannabis to deal with their irritability, their anxiety, etc., etc., etc. So when they stop taking it, of course those symptoms are going to come back. So I wrote back to these authors a week ago, and I said, suppose somebody was on antibiotics because they had an infection, and they took the antibiotics for 3 days instead of 10 days so that they didn't kill the bugs, and the bugs started to grow again, and the infection came back. Would you call it a withdrawal symptom? I never got an answer back from these people. But this group typically tries to paint marijuana in a negative manner, and it's just so absurd, but of course that's where funding comes from. So anyway, what I really want to talk to you about is evolution, marijuana, and prohibition, because I want to draw a continuity between the change that's occurred in the biosphere, really, in organisms that have cannabinoid systems and what that means, and then how that can be extended, how an understanding of that biology can be extended to an understanding of prohibition. So I'm going to rapidly go through some of the stuff. Some of you have heard it in the past, but I have to start in the beginning in order to provide the comprehensive overview, because it's the comprehensive overview that I really want to try to convey to you. So what I want to start with is the physics of life. What is the physics of life? Is there a physics out there that we can look at and describe in a relatively simple manner so that it can be shared by all, and yet provide concepts that allow us to understand really what is the fundamental nature of life? And in order to do that, we're going to go just very, very simplistically and rapidly through a concept called far from equilibrium thermodynamics. It's much easier than it sounds, at least the way I can present it. And out of that, we're going to see the development of the concept of homeostasis and what that means. But I want to take homeostasis not only from within our body, but outside of our body, into our social environment and our political environment, etc. So from the body perspective, what I want to do is describe health and illness and the relationship of health and illness to homeostasis and how that physics underlies it. And then extend that into what's going on with the cannabinoids, what are they doing, and how do they participate in all of those things. And from that, we'll then go into human behavior, and from human behavior into politics, and then from politics into religion. And and that's the answer. So anyway, far from equilibrium thermodynamics, I put this slide in here on the one hand out of respect, because Ilya Prigogine was the master behind this. He spent his life developing this theory and philosophy and science and math, and one of the most incredible humans to ever have lived. And this quote from him is very telling. The more deeply we study the nature of time, because he was into time, we don't really know, what's time, you know? We know how to measure it with a clock, but what's really going on there? And he's just come up with some incredible things there. The better we understand that duration means invention, creation of forms, continuous elaboration of the absolutely new. This is really what cannabis is about. So we'll see how that is in a moment. So what I want to do is show you how, from a physical and chemical point of view, energy flows. And when energy flows, it has the most amazing creative capacity. And it's that creative capacity that's behind life. So what I'm going to talk about is something that's a little different from something that you may be familiar with, the term entropy, that disorder must increase, and life is in contrast to that. Well, that's because the old view that would allow you to see in contrast to is really not appropriate. Equilibrium situations, when you move a little bit from equilibrium, entropy, which is disorder, will increase. However, when you are far from equilibrium and energy can flow, we'll see that molecules, innate molecules, have a creative capacity to organize themselves. And it's that organizing capacity that's responsible for life, that is a measure of health, and is manifest in terms of our social, political, economic, communities, families, everything. Everything. Because if things are happening, this is how they happen. All right? So what we're looking at here is something called the Bernard instability, and that's a petri dish about that big. It's got about 10 mLs in it of a solution. And if you heat it from below, everything that you're taught in most of the schools in this country and around the world, but not all, is that all those molecules are going to do is move faster, spin faster, and vibrate faster. and there's nothing else you would ever expect out of them. However, what you're seeing here is that they have actually organized themselves into these hexagonal convection cells.